Hello there, and welcome to the sixth episode of Dev Conversations by Swift Toolkit, where we host developers that work on interesting projects on the areas of tooling and server-side Swift. Today we have Krzysztof Zabłocki. You probably recognize his name in the written version, Krzysztof. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, nice to be here.
Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. I think the last time we met was in April last year, April 24, in Italy for Swift Heroes, and I already had the website, but I didn't have yet this series, and we spoke a little bit about Sourcery. From the beginning, I wanted to have you here because it's one of the, not sure if oldest tools in Swift, but definitely one of the first ones.
Definitely one of the more impactful, right? Because it's adopted by so many different teams across the years.
Right, and we'll soon get into Sourcery a little bit, into technical details. But first, for those who don't know you, would you mind explain a little bit what your career highlights?
Sure. So it's been a while since I started programming. Actually, I was 8 years old when I started. But iOS I started before Public SDK came out, so they announced the first iPhone. There wasn't an SDK you could use. You could only have like a Cygwin script, so you can build on a jailbroken device. I started then. I started building iOS apps through building a press publishing platform, which is interesting because that was my first project, and I had a couple other projects, and then I ended up working for Mashable, the New York Times, so news related for many years. I led the New York Times for almost 6 years. I worked on the rewrite of the newsreader application. So they decided that they want to switch from Objective-C to Swift, and they're just gonna start fresh. So that's when I joined, and I led the team to do that. After
That's
that,
a
I
lot
built
of core text, no?
Not really, because in the Times application, the articles are actually not native.
Mm-hmm.
So we use, from technical details, we use texture or text rendering. We didn't directly use UIKit because it was too slow, because we had to do things like avoid collision with images, and that's double pass for rendering text. Very complicated in terms of efficiency. But yeah, generally it was like building the whole coming up with the whole architecture. When I joined, almost no one knew functional reactive programming, and so the question was like, do we want to teach people all of those complicated details? And as you know, hot and cold, all those things really trip people out. So what we decided was that, well, I built a simplified version of FRP, which is like an observable signal. It didn't have errors, it didn't have failures, which is value over time. One of the main reasons I built that from scratch is because the available libraries back then were not tested. Like I looked at some of the code and it was like, a lot of different implementations and very little test. And it's a serious business. So I wrote all of it test-driven. And surprisingly, it has worked for so many years. It was 2016 when I joined. And until I left in 22, I think, it was still running majority of apps at the New York Times, that one library that I built from observable.
Amazing.
And when Apple came out with Combine, we simply wrote functions to convert one to another.
Sweet. RX Swift came after you wrote that?
RX Swift, I think it started when I was starting. It existed, was extremely complicated. And again, it was like a lot of different paradigms that no one knew. Like I knew because I use FRP, but other members didn't. And we needed something that people could easily learn. So like the idea of a value that can change over time is pretty easy to understand. The idea of hot and cold trips people out, and then you have a lot of weird bugs. And you could still model errors and stuff like that because you could just put a result or anything else into the observable. But it just was a lot easier to teach people. And that's always one of the biggest challenges. So I run a lot of the work I've been doing in the last now 12 years has been developer tools and architecture, right? So the biggest thing isn't building tools and frameworks. The biggest thing is how do I get people to actually use it? And for me, that comes down to like it has to be pretty straightforward to learn, and the cost of removing it if it doesn't work, especially for tools, has to be low. because if I build something that's extremely hard to integrate or remove, people will be afraid to start using it, and they'll never experience the power it can bring. So that's the main premise behind the stuff I built. And outside of like working for the Times, then I left Times. I went to work at the browser, where I was a principal engineer working on DevTools specifically. And usually, because of the level I'm at in terms of what I do, I drive my own work stream. It's extremely rare that someone in the management will tell me what to do because they just simply don't have ideas where the pain points are. And so I come up with ideas for a lot of different tooling. At the browser, I build a lot of tools related to the composable architecture. And I also, found a lot of issues with composable architecture that I ended up talking about and writing, and then ended up collaborating with Point3 to get it into upstream. So a lot of the ideas, I pushed into the TCA.
And when in that journey you decided to write Sourcery, and technically where do you begin from?
Well, so when I started doing iOS, before mobile, I used to do game dev. I built game engines and like 3D game engines and advanced graphical stuff. So when I started doing iOS, most of the stuff was pretty simple, and I was getting bored. So that's why the first project I built for iOS was a press publishing platform. It was kind of funny because it was like using XML to do communication across objects. So we had like picture books with karaoke effect, and it was all written in XML. So you could send messages like in XML to specific time slots in a different object. And so I always looked for like, more challenging things. So when then Swift came out, and I do consulting, right? That's my main source of income. I did full time, but even when I had full time, I always had non-exclusive contracts, so I could do a small amount of consulting when I had time. So when I joined the Times, I also worked with a couple other clients before that, and every time we had to write equality and hashing. That didn't exist in Swift back then, and I was like so annoyed by it because I became a computer programmer so I can automate stuff. And it just like I had to do the same stuff over and over again, and it almost never differ. So I had a client when I decided, okay, I'm going to automate this. And I wrote a very simple, minimal tool that could generate quality. And then that was 2015. And then I told them, like, guys, I think this is interesting. You should open source it. If you don't, I'll give you a year. If you don't open source it, I'm going to build a much better and more powerful version of it. And so 2016 came in. I went to the Times and I was like, well, they didn't open source it. So I wrote a completely new version using templating language. The other one was like hard-coded. And so I wrote Sourcery, the first version. And Sourcery was actually called Insanity because of the quote, like doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of insanity. And I got shit for it because people said it's a OWL-based language. And I remember people, and like I posted this really cool tool, and people were like just trashing the name. And I remember a couple of people said, "Oh, like this is a great project, but this name, like if the name was different, I would contribute." So I renamed it because I don't care. But yeah, Sourcery has been extremely popular when I released it. Even today, like macros are inspired by Sourcery. It's very clear because a lot of the examples that Apple gave us when macros came out were simply copied from Sourcery. Sourcery is still more powerful because Sourcery allows you to do things that macros simply won't ever be able to do. Main reason being macro work as a visitor pattern. When you have the evaluation of AST, it reads the type definition, it sees all the functions and variables, and then executes your code to generate more code, right, in the macro. The thing is, that only works at the place where you assign the macro to, attach the macro to. So if I have a type defined in one file and 10 different extensions in other files or other modules, my macro won't know about those extensions. And so you got to be careful because you might be relying on something that will be buggy. Because like, let's say you're building a macro so you can do like a property grid. Like in Windows, we had this where you can just attach an object and you modify all the properties or call all the functions that are possible. That would not be possible with a macro, whereas Sourcery works differently because Sourcery first scans the whole code base, aggregates all of the AST abstract syntax tree information and
in a
only
single
then run
place.
templates. Yeah, and only then run templates against it. So I can do things that macros can't. And one of the most common things that large companies do is type discovery. So imagine you have hundreds of frameworks and you want to define like a widget. Let's say you have like a Instagram app where each post could be a different type. You could store all of them in different frameworks, adhere them to one protocol, have Sourcery find all instances that implement a specific protocol, all classes that implement a specific protocol, and automatically register that in your main application. So you wouldn't have to do parsing, you wouldn't have to do integration, all of that stuff. I actually teach that, like I have an example of that in my course. But I use this in a lot of different products. Extremely powerful pattern. Airbnb does something like this with Sourcery, and there's other big companies that use it. That's really, really powerful and makes maintainability a lot easier.
So you wrote all that on top of SourceKit in the beginning?
Yeah, in the beginning, we only had SourceKit. So I used SourceKit, and then SwiftyStack came out. I didn't switch immediately, but Airbnb pinged me that Sourcery performance is slow for them. So they started rewriting, like writing their own parser using SwiftyStack. And so I spent a week after hours and I rewrote the whole parser for Sourcery and sped it up 12 times.
Amazing.
And I just pushed to main because I had so many tests that I could rely that I'm not going to break. Yeah, I had like, I think back then, like 40 or 50,000 teams use Sourcery. So extremely scary to push to main, but I was like, my tests cover it, like push. And I never had anybody emails.
If everything's green?
Yeah.
Good, very good. Do you have any maybe interesting learnings from the Sourcery journey?
I have a interesting learning in terms of community because it was like the largest project in terms of contributions that I had. I have like 20 open source projects, so I've been doing this for a while. One thing you have to let go when you do open source is like, it's not going to be the same quality you want to write your production code. Because if I get a PR and I ask for the smallest changes, usually what happens is the PR just gets left over. Like I remember I asked for like just some styling change, and it was like hanging for a month. So the rules I learned with Sourcery is like, do not break all tests, and if you add new features, add new tests. That's the only requirement, and then just don't do anything really stupid. But I don't really care about like, I care, but I cannot care because for the good of community, I need to be a little more flexible. So like, it's not exactly the quality I would write it, but I also understand like people, like I spend thousands of hours working on open source for free, and I understand people contributing. Most of them are also doing this for free, so you cannot expect.
Yeah, you need to be more pragmatic.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. And nowadays you have your own course, right? SwiftyStack.
Yeah. So I left the browser last year in May. And since then, I've been just doing consulting. So I left. I think I took 2 or 3 months off, and then I recorded SwiftyStack. I first did like MVP version of it. So the whole idea of SwiftyStack is I specialize, like my expertise is DevTools, architecture, like just generally improving efficiency of teams, right? That's why people hire me, because I can join a company and can save them hundreds of thousands of dollars in yearly costs by optimizing. Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, let's make this available to regular developers, right? So I recorded like the first version of it, which was like just 90 minutes. And I never do MVP, so I usually like polish my products.
That's 2023, right? Because you said last year.
Yeah, 2023. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so I recorded the MVP version, which was just 6 files of like 90 minutes total, and I just wanted to see if anyone's going to be interested in it. I didn't expect much. Like I was even at the point where I was like, man, maybe I won't release it. Maybe this is not my way of teaching. Like I like live speaking. I like running workshops with teams. But my friend told me like, you already recorded it, just try it. And so I released it, and in a couple of days I sold like I made like $30,000 or something. And I was like, holy shit, I need to extend it. I need to make it better because it's my name. So I spent the next month working from like 8 a.m. till 8 p.m., creating a much larger and longer curriculum. The course now has almost 8 hours and 80 lessons. So for the price, it's currently going for $179. I think it's pretty cheap for what it offers. And it's unique in the way that it doesn't teach you about specific framework because that you can just go to documentation and read, right? It shows you how to save time in all the different areas of iOS and Swift development. So if you get my course, I am like 100% sure you will be able to save at least a couple hours per week. And if you look at the hourly salaries of engineers, how long until you pay for the course? Like for most people, it pays for itself the first few days you start using these techniques easily. And it's a massive time save. And, it's all like I'm not a teacher, right? I have a very specific style. I'm down to the point. Like I don't like talking too much when I'm teaching. I don't write, like long content. I'm just getting to meat of it. So in the course, it's really focused on like this area. You can do this, this, and this, and this is gonna save you time. And it's all applicable. All the tools that I build, pretty much use every day. I mentioned a bunch of tools that other people build. I mentioned some commercial tools, which I got a deal for the people that bought SwiftyStack. So I don't get any money from it, but I just wanted to promote things that I think are valuable.
From the community.
And I got from the authors discount codes. So if you get SwiftyStack, so the course costs $179. I think discounts in total add up to over $250. So there's more in discounts than the course cost. But the idea is like, get the course, become better. Because what I found over the years is people think about time and money a little wrong, in my opinion. Because if you think about it, let's say you have to go to the office for 8 hours, right? So you can keep doing what you're doing and just work 8 hours and deliver the same amount of work. Or initially, you're going to have to spend some of your personal time to grow because oftentimes, in the time pressure, you cannot really learn significantly at work. Okay, so let's say you spend a couple of hours here and there and you get a little better. So now you can deliver the same amount of work in a little bit less time. So let's say you spend 7 hours. Now in your 8-hour window that you're at the office, you have 1 hour for learning. You no longer have to use your personal time. Now you can use that time to get even better and shorten this time more and more. And you get to a point where
in the long term it gets...
Yeah, it's like a wheel that starts spinning and it just gets easier and easier. And so you get to the point where the work that used to take 8 hours now take 4 hours or 5 hours. Let's say it takes 5 hours, right? So you save 3 hours. You can keep spending those 3 hours to get better and better and, shorten this time loop. Or you can start splitting it. Once it's a big number, you can start splitting it. So you can say, that's what I did, like looking from a personal perspective. So let's say I was able to do 4 hours what normally engineers did in 8. I spent 2 hours learning, keep getting better, and 2 hours building my own stuff for myself, either tools or products, commercial products. And so you start, this leads to this continuous improvement and also like makes you less reliant on the job. So it's like such a great way to approach efficiency. It's not about finishing your work sooner and doing nothing. It's about just getting into the momentum. Once you get the momentum going, it's a lot easier to keep doing this.
And I assume that allowed you to go full independent.
And it keeps you fresh, right? Because if you so I'm doing a new course, not just for engineers, about flow state, so getting into hyper productivity. And one of the main things you can do to get more engaged in your work and more into the flow state is to limit your working hours. So by not working 40 hours per week, or like I actually used to work 60, 80 hours, by limiting that, my creativity is better, so I can come up with more ideas quicker.
Yeah, and that also jumps to the last topic I want to touch, which is the subject of some of your recent talks about work-life balance.
Yeah, that's a very complicated topic because there's three different areas that come into play. So you have financial independence, right? That's one of the main cores. The other is how do you actually want to live? So lifestyle design, and then that integrates into work-life balance. So when I was younger, I had very ambitious goals, right? Like the first goal, buy my first apartment. The second goal, like large goal, I want to be financially independent. And I had a number in my head, and the number was arbitrary, doesn't matter. So it's for Poland, different costs. But I remember, like, I had this number, and I reached this number, and the number went up. Then I reached the next number, and it also went up, and it kept going up.
Yeah,
Each year I
you're
would.
never.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
you're
never.
chasing,
Of
just
course,
chasing.
it's a constant chase.
So what happened is, like every year, I would say, "This is my last year working full time. This is my last year working full time." And not until I read Felix Krauss recommended me this book, Die with Zero, which is an interesting book that talks about having two curves in your life, right? One curve is your net worth. So you have your salary goes up, ownership goes up, so you have more and more money. But the other curve is your health. And doesn't matter how healthy you eat, doesn't matter how much you train, that's gonna keep going down, right? So you have to live in decades, right? Even the bucket list idea is like, well, I want to do this and this. I want to jump from a building. And when I go there, I want to see Kilimanjaro or whatever. All of those ideas that you want to do, they have an end date. Because I can jump from an airplane when I'm 30. It's very unlikely I'll be able to do it when I'm 70, unless it's
Yeah,
going to be my last jump, right? So what's really important is to enjoy life, right? And I used to grind, like I would just work, and spend very little money. But I realized I had this year when I made the most money back then. And rather than being happy, I remember I looked at my tax slip, what's true. And then I looked how my year, I tried to remember like the cool things I did that
the
year.
highlights.
Yeah, and I had like three that weren't work. And I was like, I don't think this is the way to live. I was 27 back then, something like that. And I realized that what if I earn 20-30% less, but just limit consulting? Yeah, enjoy life more. And so I completely switched my approach and I started like focusing on experiences. Like I never was very materialistic. Like I don't need the newest gadgets and stuff like that. But experiences are really worth the money and usually much cheaper than ownership. Like I can jump from airplane like 7 times for the price of an iPhone. And I remember like I jumped in from airplane in 2015 and I'm probably going to remember it until I die. I'm not going to remember what iPhone I had, right? So
Yeah,
I changed my approach and finally like 2023, I left full time and decided, well, it's gonna try now because I want to start family in like next 2 years, hopefully, something like that. So if I start a family, this is gonna be a great time to start being on your own, having new businesses, new ideas, because it's too distracting, and I want to be present parent. That's very, very important to me. And so I decided to leave. I went for 2 weeks to Italy for Swift Heroes, like 2 weeks before. And then I was burned out for like 2 months. I didn't want to code at all after working for so many years. And then I did the course, and the course exploded, very successful. Went back to consulting. That has been working very well for me. And so far, like I don't need to work as much, and I make more money, or at least the same amount of money for
and
half the
I don't
time.
think you regret the change.
No, definitely don't regret the change. Although I find
Mhm.
myself, like I have 3 clients right now, and I find myself uh, enjoying more work than too little. When I have more clients, it's better for me because I can do work for one client and switch to another, and I always have something to do, and I don't need to look for extra stuff to do on my own. And right now, it's very fun working on different products. So that's also really interesting.
Yeah, you diversify a lot.
If someone wants to switch to consulting or going that route rather than full time, um, I think the most important thing is to have good money in the bank so that you don't worry too much and you can select clients well. Because if you don't have savings, then you're gonna be under time pressure to find the next gig, and that usually leads to bad gigs. To be honest, like you want to have the freedom to choose what you work on. That's one of the goals. I only have like 2 hours scheduled per week with clients. Everything else is mine. Just 2 hours of calls. That's such a difference from my full-time gigs where I had every day I had calls. I want to be present. I want to have time for my friends. I want to have time for my girlfriend or future wife, for my children. I want to be able to work from anywhere. Those were the things I wanted. And once I wrote this, I realized I need some money for that freedom, but it's not the number I was chasing. Like that number doesn't exist, doesn't matter because I'm still earning money. I'm still doing what I love. I love programming. And so I realized, well, I can just quit now. So I can already live like this. And I don't need to deal with toxic people. I don't need to deal with being annoyed. I can just wake up and decide, well, today I'm not going to work. It's a nice weather. I'm just going to go outside.
And enjoy.
And that's what I do sometimes. Yeah. There are days where I'm like, yeah, I'm not working today. And there are days on the weekends where I'm like, the weather sucks. Everyone is busy. I'm just going to do some work today. It's awesome to have that freedom.
Yeah, it is. At the same time, you need to have a lot of courage to let go this conventional way of working.
Yeah, it was hard also because like I am like a principal level, right? And for a lot of clients, that means I come up with my own task. So they have idea what they want to work on, but I have to, decide what task needs to be done, which is harder than if someone tells you what to do. If someone tells you what to do, is just go and do it.
Yeah, you're a complete owner.
Yeah. But, you gotta learn that anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and lessons and learnings over the years. These are topics that we usually don't touch in regular technical talks or regular conference talks. So it's nice to have not only fresh view, but a different approach, and maybe people can follow your ideas or suggestions and make some impact in their own lives and lifestyles. We're gonna leave links for your socials and of course to SwiftyStack. And anything else you wanted to add?
We can link to my work-life balance talk because that's up to, and that goes more into detail of like the areas we touched on. And I highly encourage people to try the lifestyle design exercise because it can open eyes for a lot of people.
That sounds good. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be in touch. Sure.
Thank you.